Have you ever gone through a great natural disaster or a great big storm in your life before? Reflect on the last time you went through a horrible natural disaster. Maybe it was a hurricane, or maybe it was a tornado, or perhaps a tsunami or an earthquake. When we are faced with this great disaster, what is the natural thing most of us do? Well, we become very fearful, right? We become very afraid. And we think to ourselves, oh no, how can I survive this? Or what will happen? We become very worried, in other words. For example, think of the year 2020 and all the problems that unfolded during this time. Clearly, it was one great big storm. But with a lot of faith, hope, and resiliency, we were able to overcome all of that. You see, the storm comes and then the storm goes. There is peace on the other side. You just have to be able and willing to weather the storm. And the problem is that sometimes we are so focused on the storm, we are so focused on the problem and the negativity that we forget that it will end. And indeed, it does end. And so let's go even deeper still. For each one of us, we have also experienced storms in our own spiritual life or our own personal life. What do I mean by this? Well, imagine the last time you faced a major challenge in your own personal life. It could be anything. Perhaps the loss of a family member or a loved one, like a father or a mother, a sibling, for example. Perhaps it is going through a divorce and you constantly have to argue and fight with your spouse over the assets and childcare. Or maybe it is a crisis, a personal crisis that you had to overcome, like a mental breakdown. Well, the storms I'm talking about here could really be anything that you have experienced personally in your life that has a profound impact on you on a personal level. Now consider this. When you were at the most difficult part of the struggle, the most challenging time, so to speak, what did you try to do to overcome it? Friends, here's the point. The analogy of storms serve as a great reminder for all of us in our own spiritual life. The reason is because we can all relate to them on a personal level. And so in the Gospel of St. Mark, chapter 4, verses 35 to 41, the disciples of Jesus got into the boat. They went in with him to cross to the other side. And it was dark. And a violent squall, that's a nice word for storm, came up out of nowhere, and they were afraid for their life. Although they have seen everything Jesus did and taught at this point, they still did not have faith. Let's take a look at the passage in more detail here. Here's what St. Mark wrote. On that day, as evening drew on, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let us cross to the other side." Now, leaving the crowd, they took Jesus with them in the boat just as he was, and other boats were with him. A violent squall came up and waves were breaking over the boat so that it was already filling up. Jesus was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. They woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" He woke up, rebuked the wind and the sea. "Quiet, be still." The wind ceased and there was great calm. Then he asked them, "Why are you so terrified? Do you not yet have faith?" Why are you so terrified? Friends, this is a beautiful gospel story that serves to remind us of who is truly in charge. You can find similar gospel stories also in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 8, verses 23 to 27, and the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 8, verses 22 to 25. Here, I would like to share 3 important points for us to reflect on further regarding this gospel message. And just a reminder too, to please remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel to receive weekly reflections on faith. So let's get started. Point number 1. Storms can appear suddenly in our life. It is true that storms can easily creep up in our life when we do not expect them to. And just like in this gospel passage here, did you know that in the Sea of Galilee, storms can come suddenly? If you take a look at the geography of the Holy Land, for example, you'll notice that the Sea of Galilee, and it's really the size of a lake by most standards today. Right? And so the Sea of Galilee is surrounded by mountains on all sides. And during the day, the temperature can get very hot. And then even in the evening, the wind blowing from the other side of the mountain comes down into the sea. And when you have this mix of cool air coming from the mountain with a hot air that has been lingering in the sea all day, it can create this storm that comes out of nowhere. And so the truth is this: just like there are seasons in the year, spring, summer, fall, and winter, there are also seasons in our life. Sometimes we enter into a difficult storm in our own life, and sometimes it comes out of nowhere as well. For example, some time ago, I had a friend who recently retired. He is in his early 60s and was very much looking forward to spending time with his wife and family. Shortly after retirement, he had a sudden heart attack and died. Now imagine how difficult that would be for his wife and family. It was a clear shock to all of them. Now imagine how difficult that would be for his family. It was a clear shock, and as you can see, they had to go through this difficult trial, this storm, if you will, this major challenge in their own life. But as with all storms and challenges, there will be peace. And so this brings us to our second point here I'd like to share. Number 2, how do we deal with storms in our own life? Well, if you think about it, it's an important question to reflect on. How do we deal with storms in our own life? In other words, how do we deal with the problems, the challenges, and the difficulties that come our way? On the one hand, it is natural to react negatively, to be fearful and afraid. But then on the other hand, it is important for us in these moments to really have faith, to trust and believe that this too shall pass. And so when we face difficult situations, it's important for us to keep calm, to carry on, to take a look at this gospel passage here, and to be reminded that God is in charge. You see, the disciples were so afraid. They thought they were going to die. The words they used were, "We are perishing." And so if we put ourselves into the disciples' shoes, at the moment where they experience all this, imagine that you were on the boat as one of the disciples and this violent squall, the storm came out of nowhere. How would you react? Now, let's not forget that Jesus also is on this boat as well. And so all the challenges that we face in our life is a lesson for us. Sometimes it could be painful in the moment, but we know that those painful moments will come to pass. The darkness will turn into day. And what we think is really, really, really bad is actually in reality not all that bad, which then brings us to our last and final point here I'd like to share. And that is the need to have faith in Jesus Christ. Point number 3, the need to have faith in Christ. Friends, the reality is that we all face difficulties in our life. We have all encountered storms. And so then let me ask you, what do you do to overcome these storms? The gospel invitation here is one of faith. You see, St. Mark is demonstrating the fact that the disciples of Christ, who apparently are disciples and have faith, when this problem came up, or this great violent squall on the Sea of Galilee, they forget who Jesus is. And sometimes in our own life too, our faith is tested. The problem that we encounter in our life is to help us deepen our faith and our trust in Jesus. And so during the dark moments of our life, it's important that we turn to Jesus and to ask him to help us overcome these moments of darkness, to overcome the storms in our own life, and for him to increase our faith, because there is indeed light on the other side. And if we have a family member or a friend or someone we know who is going through a major problem or a storm in their own life, we should make the effort to try to help them overcome those challenges. Ultimately, this very story here we reflect on, serves to illustrate that Jesus is Lord. The ending of the gospel passage makes this clear. They were filled with great awe and said to one another, "Who then is this, whom even the wind and sea obey?" Friends, here is the reality. Faith can help us overcome obstacles and challenges and storms in our own personal life. The question is this: are we willing to trust Jesus? Are we willing to enter into that boat with Jesus? May God bless you.